hello, and welcome to the newest episode of Borderline Podcast Disorder. I hope you had a good week. I hope you will have a good week, and yeah, I wish whatever you wish for, as long as it's healthy, is gonna happen. But yeah, good to have you back, folks, and thanks for tuning in. And this week's episode, it's going to be with a comedian from the London circuit. Her name is Lucy Pook, and we talked about mental health and the comedy circuit in London, and it was interesting, and it was a good episode, and we figure out we got some common friends, and then we met a couple of times just to like hang out um, after the interview was done. And before we go into that, well, I'm recording this episode for the first time yesterday. We've allowed for the kittens that we adopted to leave the bedroom where we were keeping them to basically be able to like keep a close eye on them to basically explore the house now. And as I'm recording this, they are jumping around in the living room, and I love them so much. The pickle and sarma are amazing, and if you want to see them, you know what? Check my socials, and you'll have a good time. It's just beautiful. I feel great. They are such a joy to be around. Although they are still babies, they are still annoying, very loud sometimes, especially in the morning. And I struggle with sleeping this week because of them, but I don't mind it as much as I used to when I was struggling with nightmares, for sure. I'd rather have this. And what else has happened this week? Well, it's been a wild week. I guess social media wise, right? And yeah, it's been a lot of oh, I guess I'm not talking to this person again, or it was a case of actually I don't want this on my feed, and removing people, and unfollowing people and muting accounts and stuff like this. And I did it to some friends as well, which is not to say I don't want to talk to them anymore. It's more to say that I don't want to follow them. You know, that's that was my point. And I yeah, I had a lot of thoughts over this, because I was talking to my to even to my therapist about it. I was like, oh God, like this is gonna be awkward. Then I realized, you know what, it's not. Again, I gotta do what's right for me, and yeah, I gotta look out for myself, and I did. I'm looking out for myself, and that's good. I think that's the right way to do it, and I'm happy with it. And look, I've luckily, I think this week it's been a lot of self-soothing. One of the skills that I used, because I started. I felt obviously very tired because of the not sleeping as well because of the baby kittens. Then it was a lot of self-soothing because I had some terrible headaches, and even as I record this, I feel a little bit sick. And yeah, accepting that, and looking after myself, for it, and not judging myself over it. It's been huge this week, and I feel like I've managed it better than I would have done in previous, or than I have done in previous circumstances. In regards to the police skill, I think I eat better. I think I had a healthier week. Once again, there are ups and downs, and there are some understandable downs, um, and some small, very tiny ups, but I'll take them because I think you gotta take the wins. You gotta see those things as they are, and What else? Yeah, I think the emotional dysregulation after last week when I did feel, enraged at times, and I did have an episode where, say, my emotions went higher than it was needed to be. I feel like this week I didn't get there, and that was good. But I've also worked a lot for it, because there were moments during the week when I just couldn't, um, I guess, manage. Like it felt hard to manage the way I was feeling or the things that I wasn't able to. I was getting very emotional, and then I just had to take all these, just take some time. I think every before I either, reply to someone if I was getting angry, or if I were to, I don't know, send a message, or if I were to do whatever I was going to do. um I just took a couple of seconds before I sent that. I took a couple of seconds before I I even had the problem with my an app on my TV, and I thought, I'm just gonna smash this what's it called, the TV remote in half, and then I thought, you know what, it's not gonna help. Although I'm very annoyed because it's been a week since this app is not working. I've done all the troubleshooting to try and fix it. I don't think snapping the remote in half would work, and you know what, I haven't done it, and I think I've also found that while speaking with some people in unpleasant occasions was helpful to take some time before I would reply to those people's, comments. Or yeah, I had someone who was very hard to talk to, but we made it work, and ultimately we managed to become, I wouldn't say friends, but we had a nice chat, you know. And look, I'm getting a bit distracted now because the kittens, they're just, they were running around, and now they are next to me. They are just sniffing some books and bru- browsing, perusing. Anyway, they're just like walking around the window. But I'll leave you with Lucy. I'll leave you with the episode. I hope you enjoy it and come back for more. But yeah, we'll catch you later. Awesome. So, Lucy, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm
Nice.
good.
Thank you for coming to record today.
It's a pleasure.
Nice. How? Think nice. Yeah. Self feedback. But no. Yeah. How's your week been? Have you been gigging much? Have you been doing much?
I've had the quietest week since I started doing comedy. Actually,
No way.
yeah, it wasn't planned. In a way, it wasn't planned. I mean, I did say. I mean, as a little bit of background, I had about my year anniversary recently of doing comedy. So I haven't been going.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I'm, I don't know whether everyone counts how many gigs they do, but I know exactly how many gigs I've done. Do you count?
Same, yeah.
There are people that I've met, and I guess you get to a certain point where you stop counting. I think I've met people where they say if you're still counting, then you're still relatively new. But then I still know people that have been going for a few years that are counting how many gigs they've done. So I'm on about 87. I say about, but I know exactly. 87. I'm on 87, yeah. Nice. And I was feeling a little bit wiped out before Christmas, thinking after the new year I would cut back a little bit on the number, but also I wanted to be doing longer sets. So doing less gigs, being more specific, being a bit more kind of thoughtful about the gigs that I was doing and trying to do longer sets. And I'd say it's going quite well in terms of that.
Nice.
Been trying to do some more 10 minutes and 15.
I think that's such a
good. At least I feel, because every time I think about comedy, you always, or at least I always heard these stories about like how comedians in the States, or like professional comedians, you do like 3 to 5 gigs at night, and like you hear all those like crazy stories about like people doing like crazy numbers during the week. But I don't know how can someone get there. And I think even if you were to do most of the open mics or anything in London, it's, I don't know, it just doesn't feel, it's just harder. I think these days, again, I don't know what it was like before the pandemic, because I wasn't doing comedy then, but I think it's good to listen to yourself. And I think to what you were saying before, I heard the both things, where like some people say, oh, if you're still counting, you've not done enough. But then also, as we were chatting earlier, I know someone who counted precisely how many gigs they did last year, and I do count. I think I'm on. I am on 297
Yeah.
as of today. But I think hopefully by the time this is released, it will be more than that. But yeah, 297.
So you were saying that your 3-year anniversary is on Tuesday.
Sorry?
Were you saying your comedy
No,
anniversary?
it's my 300th
300th
gig
is on
going to be on
Tuesday, right,
Tuesday.
okay.
Because now basically I'm going to do like, I'm doing one today, tomorrow.
Yeah.
So like from today until Thursday, I'm going to be out every night.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I'm actually like looking forward, but also I think is because I also find I need to get some value out of the gig. I think that's what I was going earlier, where I was saying that I appreciate what you're saying about like, I want to do 10s, I want to do a bit longer. Also, like, for example, when I book a gig now, I think, okay, I'm booking that gig because I either want the exposure or because I have new material.
Yeah.
I don't usually like, I wouldn't go somewhere with the same material that I've done for 2 years and I know it works, but then I go to a night where it's either no one there or just very little people. I'd rather spend the night, I don't know, playing games, to be honest, or watching TV.
That's another interesting kind of segue, isn't it, about where you practice your new material, because most of the nights that I've been doing, a lot of them are new material nights. But like you said, I don't want to turn up at a night that I haven't done and do new material. So it's like I tend to do the new material in nights that I've been doing quite a lot. So you have that kind of element. And then obviously trying to do longer sets as well, which tends to be older stuff that I've been working on and putting together. But like you were saying about the American style, it's also that contentious issue, isn't it, in London specifically, of like bringer nights and non-bringer nights. And you couldn't possibly do 3 gigs a night unless you had a permanent bringer affixed to you, like some people do because they bring their partners and things. But I think that's a challenge, isn't it? There's a night in Shoreditch that is the American style open mic, and when I first got there I was really bemused. I wasn't sure what was happening because people were coming and going and coming and going. I was like, how is this working? And then I realised it was one of those things. These guys were doing a gig beforehand, they were coming there and doing that and then going on to another one, because it's an on-bringer, obviously, and that works quite well. I could see it. I see a group of people quite frequently that are doing that, doing 2 or 3 gigs a night, keeping going. But these are young guys, and I don't know if they have to get up early the next day.
I find on that as well, because I've been. Are you London? Are you from London?
I'm not from London. I lived here for about 20 years, and then just before COVID, I moved back to where I grew up. So I live in Kent at the moment.
No way. I've recorded with someone else from Kent.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago.
Whereabouts?
I don't know whereabouts he's from precisely, but I don't know. Danny Scott.
Oh yeah, I know Danny.
Yeah. So Danny's been on as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's not. He's from Maidstone, I think, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah. The Kent comedians have come across each other. So I'm travelling in to do comedy, which is why when it becomes that thing of reciprocal kind of bringer nights, I don't get involved because I'm paying to come in and it's my time that I've been in London and I have to be doing a gig if I'm coming in, because it's quite difficult to give your time.
Well, makes sense,
Yeah. But I mean, I'm an art teacher, so I was working in all around London and then moved back to Kent and was working locally, but then I now work in a psychiatric hospital, actually.
No way.
Yeah, in London as an art teacher. So any young person who's an inpatient, there's a school for people that are inpatients in this hospital specifically, and now we've got this little school within the hospital. So it's quite a unique teaching environment. What it does mean is that I have to get up very early and travel in from Kent. So it does affect the gigs that I'm doing if we're relating to comedy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm trying to do gigs when I'm in London anyway. So it's a real balance of how to not be completely exhausted all the time, but also do the nights when I'm in London, but also then have to get back up. So I do a lot of staying on people's, friends of mine's, like spare rooms, etc. if I have a real run of them in London. Yeah. It's a funny life at the moment. No pun
But I know, well, I think I had no idea about the art school, by the way, so I'm going to ask you some questions, because I'm just curious, like not the art school, I'm about the arts school in the hospital. I don't know. Anyway, my thing was earlier about like, whether you're from like London or how long you've been in London, is because I've been here for almost 2 years now. And one of the reasons why I still don't, I sometimes double on the night, but I still find it really hard because of the transportation. Because I still, again, like, with almost 2 years in London, I don't know how to get places. And, to me, I feel like, I can do this and this. And like, I remember a couple of weeks ago, the last time when I doubled up, and I was panicking, like, from one gig to another. And my head was just like, oh God, like, how am I going to get there? What's going to happen? And it was just chaos. So that's why, maybe, who knows, in the future, but I do see what you're saying. And I agree. I think sometimes it does it feels harder, but anyway, you live in Kent now.
I live in Kent, yeah. It just seems, I don't know, I never found myself, I'd never thought that I would leave London, but now I've been away for a few years, and you get kind of used to a quieter, steadier lifestyle, and then I've completely flipped it, and now I've just got mayhem in my life at the moment with my scheduling.
But what made you want to like how did you get through to teach arts in the hospital?
Well, so I trained as an art teacher in a mainstream school, and then immediately went into special needs, which was I kind of had a background in working in special needs. My mum was a special needs teacher.
Oh wow.
And I used to be a makeup artist before I was an art teacher. So I was a freelance makeup artist. And then I was working, when I wasn't doing much work, when I wasn't getting any makeup work, I would work in special needs schools as a teaching assistant. Not qualified teacher at that point. And then so I went into special needs for maybe 4 years. And then the particular school that I was in kind of got rid of specialist subject teachers just due to finances, and then I ended up, I got into teaching to teach art specifically. I didn't kind of want to teach general core subjects. So then I moved to a school in Hampstead, which is a kind of well-known creative arts, drama, music, arts departments were really well funded and really revered, and I was there for a while. And then a change in my kind of relationship status meant that I left London and moved home temporarily. Right. And then COVID happened shortly after. So then I had this kind of period for me, that time, the timing and this time where everything kind of stopped for a while was a really kind of, for me, it was like I really needed that at the time. It was this benefit. I found it I had a real period of creativity during COVID.
Nice.
I think because you can get so busy with your work, and that I didn't have any time, even though I was teaching art, it doesn't necessarily reflect on how creative you're being in your own life, I think.
Interesting.
Be teaching it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're constantly kind of practicing.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes it can do the opposite. So I had this period during COVID where I was like insanely creative. I'd go through phases, but so for me it was a really positive thing. I'm not saying in any way that COVID was a positive thing, but for me and the space it allowed me, and to take a step back from things was
Wow.
really useful. Yeah.
And what did you do? If you want to give like more details about like what, how did you get like what kind, like what side of your like creativity got? You know, like what do you I don't know, like painting, or these are when you started writing comedy, or like what did you, what is it that you started doing then?
I was doing. I mean, I did fine art at university. I moved into doing makeup art after that, but I was a fine artist, I guess, not necessarily illustrative, but I would do lots of pencil drawing and really refined outcome work. And then when I moved home and COVID happened, I started doing these art recreations that a lot of people were doing, which was a hashtag Getty Museum Challenge. I don't know if you saw them.
No, I haven't actually.
It was essentially, the premise was that you had to create a piece of work, a famous artwork, out of things in your house. Using yourself and props, basically.
Okay.
And I think I think there were stipulations at the beginning, like you could only use 3 items or something. Anyway, I didn't stick to the brief, but and then I also, the Getty Museum were doing it, but some other people were doing it for a different, you know. The Getty Museum, I think, maybe just kind of took it on as a self-promotion thing of like, you've got to make a piece of work from the Getty Museum. But people were making famous artworks in their own home. So I ended up, and I'd moved back to my mum's house. So she lives in this, it was my great-grandfather's house. She left it when he hadn't died, but he passed it on to her. And so it's full of a lot of his stuff, and then her parents' stuff and my mum's stuff. So she's a bit of a hoarder, which is insanely beneficial to me. And I thought that all the time I've been like, Mum, maybe you need a bit of a clear out. And then she was like, well, you wouldn't be able to be doing this now, would you, if I'd got rid of that? Because I had all these amazing props to make these recreations of artwork. It was like a play, you know, it was like being in a costume department. And you had to kind of think about how to recreate a certain thing with the limited resources that you had. But I found the challenge really interesting.
Okay.
So I got obsessed with doing these. I did about 50 of these paintings.
Wow. How long does it take you to... I feel like that's such a... As I'm going to ask you, it's such a... I feel like... I'm really sorry. I feel like it's a dumb question because I'm pretty sure it depends. But how, on average, like how long does it take you to... Like how long does it take you to work on a, say, a piece of art? I guess something that you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would do... It would really vary because I'd started off with a Modigliani that was essentially just doing my makeup like a Modigliani painting. So I had that, you know, I was a makeup artist. So I
have
had
no
that.
idea what that is.
Yeah. He painted women in a certain way and it's quite stylized. But for this one, from the first one I did, I needed just makeup. And then for other things, it developed into making props and things. So each one would be quite different. But then I would do I did one that was a painter called Agnes Martin, who's a minimalist, who does very subtly differentiated stripes of colour. And for that one, I basically stood behind a clothes dryer and took a picture. You know, so some of them are very quick. And then other ones I was creating whole kind of Turner-esque landscapes with scarves and props and little toys. And so it would vary. But I just was so immersed in it. For me, it was it was the storytelling and it was the problem solving. It was so many different things at once. And then there was a bit of the costume and makeup. So, yeah, that was what I spent a lot of the lockdown doing. They made a book of them, so I've got one of the pieces that I made is in the book for the Getty Museum. I did the Damien Hirst shark. He's got the British. He was one of the young British artists, YBAs. They were referred to here. It was a group of art students in the 90s who all, you know, Tracy Emin was one of them. And Damien Hirst shark is this shark in formaldehyde, and I recreated that in my bath at home, and that's the one that got into the Getty Museum book. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. That sounds cool. I mean, look, I think I gotta say I'm really sorry because I have no. I feel like I'm very illiterate when it comes to any other like art form besides of comedy. Maybe I'd like to think music. I can have an opinion about that, but outside of it, I have no. I think I go. I think my mom used to take me to like exhibitions when I was a kid, or like a kid. I was like younger, and then I still go sometimes, and I just look around. And I'm like, wow, this was really nice, but I am amazed, by like what you're saying. It just sounds brilliant. And it sounds so cool, and I kind of I felt a little bit like, oh God, I wish I knew more. But it sounds fantastic.
But I think it's like because I feel like with my art practice, if I can call it that, it's like I go through phases, real intense phases of doing one thing really intensely. So it will be when I moved back, and then COVID happened, and I had all this time and stuff around me to make that. That's the output that I was doing. And then after that, I moved on. It's like I got to 50, and it felt like that was done now. So I didn't pursue doing anything to do with that. It was this intense period of creativity around that. And then I took 5 months off work teaching just to do a project. I feel like I do very well if I set myself deadlines for stuff.
Fair.
So I started this project. It was 100 illustrations that I had to do before the new year. And I'd given myself, it wasn't one a day. I didn't have to draw a drawing every day. But it was something like 20 a month. Yeah, 5 months, and I was doing this project. And once I'd decided on that, and I'd set myself this goal, I'm stubborn. And my friend called me a starter finisher the other day. He's like, when you start stuff, you always finish it. I'm like, I know. Once I've decided on completing something, then I will complete it. So I did a drawing project after that. So it feels like none of my kind of it. In a way, to me, sometimes, if I don't analyse it too much, it feels like all the things that I do creatively, they're quite disconnected. But now that I'm talking to you about the art transcriptions, we would call them, there was every one of them tended to have an element of humour in them. Because you're recreating a beautiful classic kind of great master painting, but you're doing it with unusual objects. So there's going to be this kind of humour within it, because I don't know, for example, if you're recreating something that uses some really kind of grandiose, like serious tome of a book or object, and you're replacing it with something that's obviously not kind of doesn't have that gravitas, they've got this kind of humorous twist to it.
I can see it. It makes like not funnier because you're like, I do get the point, yeah.
Or I did the only painting that I did from the Getty Museum, because none of the other ones that I did were in their collection, was my last recreation, and I can't even remember what it was, but the guy's it was a Renaissance painting, and he has this particular hat on, and then my hat had to be made out of a cushion with a picture of a cat on it that my mum had, with like something tied around my head. But in the photo, you have to investigate it too. You kind of have to delve into the images. And then once you discover that a certain thing, like when I did the Damien Hirst shark, for the pointy bit of the head of the shark, I used this samosa maker that my mum had brought back from India, just gaffer taped onto my head. But you don't see it immediately. You have to kind of look. And then my mum had a boomerang that was in a recreation that I did of the Lady of Shalott, which is a pre-Raphaelite painting, at the head of a boat. And then it also became my tail for when I was a shark, whatever fin that was. Yeah. Yeah. So you'd see the same objects would crop up. So there'd be these like most valuable player kind of in terms of football analogies, but these objects that would keep cropping up like a motif almost.
God, that's interesting, because I always wonder how, people look at stuff, and you can look at the same things, but you can look at the same thing, but yet see something totally different. And that's what it feels like, because I think I'm also on the side where I every time I look at something, I look with like a side. I'd like to think of the side of. I think it's either I'm very like humorous about stuff. I don't know if it's a word. Maybe, hopefully, it's a word. Yeah, I either look at something and I'm like, I have like, oh, there's something funny in it, or it's something like really dark and sad and almost like ending.
Yeah.
And but it's just interesting because I think I think that's why overall I love art, and I think that's why it's so one of the reasons why it's so subjective, because you can see, like you said, you can see the boomerang, and it's it's like multiple things, and you might not even have any idea about it.
Yeah. And then within that one object, you're seeing a boomerang, and it's like, well, that's not a shark's fin, but it's a boomerang. But then if you've seen previous pieces where the boomerang has also kind of been a part of it, then it becomes another layer of humour, doesn't it? And I guess with the stand-up too, it's like a lot of the stuff that we do is like you were saying before, we're telling stories, but then the bit where someone thinks that they know what you're going to say is subverted. That's where the humor is, isn't it? So it's a little bit similar to the artworks that I was making.
It's really interesting, and how did you get from this to comedy? Like what made you want to do comedy? Were you like a comedy fan for a long time? Were you I don't know, were you like journaling? Were you like keeping a journal? How did you get into it?
I've always seen a lot of live comedy. Growing up in my 20s and 30s in London, I'd go a lot to places like Soho Theatre, stuff like that, and see this. But I was seeing it. I never particularly went to the open mic scene or that area of comedy. I was always seeing finished shows, I suppose. Yeah. Or you'd see big comedians practicing material, but in a way it was always already at a level of refinement. But basically, I never thought about doing comedy until some friends of mine set up a local night in Kent, Tunbridge, where I live, and they had a night that was programmed called Hold the Line. It's called.
No way.
Do you know it?
Yeah, Rowan is. I'm doing it in a couple of weeks. Rowan is
a good friend of mine.
No way.
Yeah, so I met Rowan. So I moved back. I reconnected with some local friends, and then started hanging out in the local area, became friends with Rowan and Jack, who was his friend who set it up, and then another friend who was a barman at a pub that I used to go to, Moby. He also did stand-up, and we kind of connected them all together, and then they started this night. And they did their official night, and then they decided that they were going to start an open mic night. So then me and my friend Joe, who went to all of these comedy nights with me, started to go to the open mic nights, and I thought, that looks absolutely terrifying. And I was in that phase, and I think I've tended to do this now, is to really challenge myself to do something that I think is terrifying. And that was the main thing. And there seemed to be, like, not everyone, and I also think this kind of like people obviously can appear to be quite confident on stage, but with it inside is very much not, because I think I can appear to look quite confident.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, you do. And when you're on stage, you seem very comfortable. I
think that's grown, and I do think I'm more confident than I was when I started, obviously, but I do think I am quite good at having, and I think a lot of that is to do with teaching as well, is that you're having to present a certain a certain level of confidence to a group of people, teenagers who are absolutely terrifying. And I think it's kind of benefit. I'm segueing again, but I think the comedy has helped in the teaching and in a way. But yeah, so I basically said to Jack, who is no longer running the night, but just because he moved countries, but because their friend Sang as well. I don't know if you know Sang.
Yeah, of course I know Sang. Yeah.
I said to Jack, I'm going to do it. So then I was like, I'm going to go and do recce and have a look at the night, because I hadn't actually been. And I turned up and he was like, are you doing it tonight then? I was like, absolutely not. I was like really thinking, no, I can't do this. This is like, I think I've made a grave error. Because I said to my friend Jo, I was like, I think we should do the open mic night. And she said, I don't think I'm going to do the open mic night. And I was like, well, I'm going to. So then I committed and I said to Jack, right, I'll do the next one. And then I got my way. So I've spoken to quite a lot of people, and a friend of mine, Ben, who is local as well, he's been doing stand-up for a few years now. Ben Patterson is he's a friend of mine in that's from Tunbridge as well.
Oh, I love Ben. He's coming in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. We were friends before, like, anything to do with comedy. We used to do a lot of pub quizzes together and stuff.
No way.
We all grew up there, but we're different ages. Like, he's a bit younger than me, but so I know, speaking to him and various other people would, when they first did their first 5 minutes, would go off somewhere completely out of the way, that they knew that there would be no one that they know going to see them. And I did the exact opposite. I invited everyone I know to this first 5 minutes that I was going to do, because I knew that I just knew I wouldn't get on stage if I hadn't committed to it in a way. So I made sure that there were so many people there that there was no way that I could back out. That's
kind of like what I did the first time. I know I told everyone I'm going to do it. And then I actually remember walking on stage, and all I thought was, I'm just going to go pick up the mic, apologize, and go back, like get off stage. Because I was mortified. And then I started doing it. I was like, okay, cool. This is fun. And I did it again and again. But anyway, yeah. So, wow, yeah.
So then
Similar.
it was just, they started a night. I said I would do it. And then, like I was saying earlier, like my friend described me as a starter finisher. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. It was terrifying, though. I've never had that much fear, like, about an out. And also a local friend who's actor trained made me run through it with her about a week before, because I hadn't said it out loud to anyone. And I hated that. I hated every minute of when she came round, because saying stuff out loud to someone is mortifying, isn't it? You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying these words out of my mouth and you are watching. She's like, well, you're going to be doing it to a lot more people next week. So then she was really good she was training me almost. If I made a mistake, or if I said and did something too quickly, she was like, go back to the beginning. So for about a week before I did it, I had this training. Wow. And she very much, like, I did it, I already had a bit of the pace and I was already deadpan, but she made me really hold the pause, like, and I think I've extended that now, and I've really gone into the pauses, because I feel like it's quite terrifying to be on stage and not be saying something. But she would say, no, you need to breathe there, and you can wait and pace yourself. So that was integral to the delivery.
Of course, yes.
So I was really grateful by the time I did it, because I had got this rhythm almost. But about an hour before, I was in the local Wetherspoons. I talk about Wetherspoons in my set anyway, don't I? And I felt my hands and feet were tingling, and all the blood was draining out of all the bits that were useful. Like, I was like, I don't think I can do it. I'm going to pass out. And she was like, no. And she was like this amazingly, like, grounding force. She was like, your body is just telling you that it's trying to stop you doing it. You just need to. So I had this kind of emotional support. And also, it was just me and her before I went to the fire station, because it's an old fire station. But yeah, I tell you, like, after that first time that you do the first 5 minutes, did you feel completely elated? Because I was just like, for about 24 hours afterwards, I was like high.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the after the first gig, I just felt like, oh yeah, I think that's it. I found my new job. I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. And then I think after we went to town, had drinks, I think I got home at like 4 in the morning, because I was still drinking at the time. And I got home at like 3 in the morning. And but it was like, I always thought about, like, I think when I don't know, someone goes and like wins a Grammy or like an Oscar, it was like, wow, this is it's so cool. And I remember just chatting, and I got into like this conversation with my friend about like comedy, and I was like, oh, and I want to do this and I want to get that, and then a couple of weeks later, I think I bombed for the first time. Not bombed. I feel like I just didn't do well for the first time, and I remember thinking, I think I'm done. And then I was like, no, I can't do. And you were saying, it's quite nice, like you. And I was actually wondering, have you been like speaking with your friend, the one that like actor trained since then? Like, has she helped you out more with like your more like recent work?
Not for a while, but for the first. So after I did the first 5 minutes, and you were asking me about writing earlier, and I think when I made the decision that I was going to do this first 5 minutes at this open mic night, I already had a load of stuff that I hadn't written down, but that had happened in my life. So I feel like I had a bank of material already good to go. And then the next day, the next morning after that first 5 minutes, I wrote the next 5 minutes the next day of some other stuff that I had. And I didn't plan to. I didn't sit down and think I'm going to write another 5 minutes. Yeah. So it came really quickly. And then after that, I started to panic a little bit because I wasn't writing new stuff. And then I made a decision to not panic and just let stuff naturally happen. And then you see that people are doing the same 5 quite a lot, because I didn't know really how it worked and what the process was.
Have you ever, because this has happened to me, I think, so basically just to give you a bit of context, and I think to anyone listening, when I started, I had this like 5 minutes, which did really well, and then did really well again, and then it did really well again, and then I tried another 5 minutes, and it went really badly, and that's when, again, the first time when I was like, oh, I think I'm going to quit this, and I remember having this thought of, oh my God, am I just like a 5-minute comedian? Have you like in my head I always thought, what if that's it? Like, what if I have, because I think I had the same because of like everything that's happened in life and the way like I had like so much stuff in the bank. That first 5 minutes was so easy because I felt like I have so much stuff that's been going on.
Yeah,
I just put it out there and that's it. And now I had this thing where I was like, what if that's it? What if that's the whole like
completely?
I
completely had that. But also it was a weird one because I also had no plans to get into comedy. But suddenly the first 5 minutes, that buzz that you get was addictive.
Yeah.
But you can never replicate it. Moby, who was one of the guys that set up Hold the Line, he messaged me the next day saying that like to congratulate me, and then said, "How are you feeling?" And I was like, "Yeah, really, really good." And he was like, "That's the feeling you're going to be chasing now for the rest of your time that you do comedy, for however long that is." Because I had no plans about doing it, but it's just kept happening. It's like, and I say that earlier, it was like, it hasn't kept happening. You keep doing it like because you want to do it. It's in your hands. But yeah, it snowballed, I suppose. And then I'd still have moments, not still, like, I mean, obviously all the time. It's like, am I going to write anything else again? I've got a little book. I have a little moleskin notebook and a pen that I carry around with me and jot stuff down. But I don't sit down and think I'm now going to do an hour's worth of writing, which I think is something that I might start to do. I might set myself some time to do that. I'd had this really good day recently where my friend was writing a dissertation for something, and we went and sat in the National Theatre, which is quite good to get out of your house and sit in a public space, I think. And I wrote down all the bits that I've got on Post-it notes and kind of started to rearrange stuff. And that was the only time that I've actively gone and sat down and thought, I'm going to work through my notebook. But so I was worried because I'd written stuff really easily, like you said at the beginning, because obviously you've got a big storage back catalogue of life experiences. And then I've decided the only way was to not panic. And also, I kept having these moments where I'd think of something, and then I'd think, I better write that down. And then I didn't write it down.
Well, you see,
and then I was like, that's gone forever. And then I was really sad. But then I think you've got to let stuff go because it might come back if it's worth it. It may not come back, but then there might be another thing.
That's where I feel like, because I'm, which is actually quite, we in this respect I think we're quite different, because you were saying like you're a start, or like your friend said that you're a start finisher. I'm usually a start something else and then start something else again. And with the comedy, if I am to say put an hour of my day to do it, I will not do it. However, I'd have like a ticking thing. Basically, I use like my notes app and I just like tick a box every time, and I'm like, have I wrote something? But also I have a notebook with me and I have my phone like on me all the time. and I always try to write something as soon as I got like the idea, because I feel like I've let so much stuff go. And I think it's something that we were chatting about like earlier, where I've found myself more recently writing a lot right after the gig,
Yeah.
or sometimes while I'm at the gig.
Yeah.
Because I would go on stage, I would say something, and then I'm like, oh, and this is where it can go on like my bigger set or like the bigger picture. And then I scribble it down. I'm like very quickly, and then I have again both ways. But I think I have a dated. I have dated notes on my phone, like 16th of March, 17th of March, 18th of March. But then I also do it on my notebook. So I don't think it's one size fits all, or like one. I think everyone does it very differently. But I always think about this. I think it was Seinfeld who said something about how you got to make sure you write it down, because sometimes you kind of like you have to think of your mind as like a pipeline, and if you allow even if it's something bad.
Yeah.
Well, look, for example, today I wrote something that's actually, I think, is more inspirational rather than a joke, but I still wrote it down. So then at least I feel like I'm not blocking that pipe.
Yeah.
In case something comes out.
Yeah, I think it's paying attention to everything, isn't it? And I'm trying to do that, and I do try and write stuff down immediately now, because I've had these moments where I've had this deep remorse that I've forgotten a thought, which probably wasn't even that like something in the first place, but it's frustrating.
Yeah.
But I think I think of something, and I think what happens is that I think, oh, that's something that I'm not going to forget because that's really good, and then I'm like, that is gone. But
I think it happened to me the other night. I was brushing my teeth and I was like, oh, this sounds brilliant. And then by the time I finished brushing, I forgot what I wrote. Then I was just miserable for like 30 minutes, just trying to remember.
I'm trying to let the same with like worrying about writing new stuff, is I'm trying to be more kind of mindfulness of it and just kind of let the thoughts come through.
Yeah.
And they come out the other side, and you may not have anything. And then like it takes you by surprise. Like I think just before Christmas I was doing a lot of gigs, and I got a chest infection and I couldn't really speak properly, and I had 4 gigs back to back, and I really wanted to do them. They were all nights that I hadn't done. So on the Sunday morning, I had one that Sunday. It was Sunday shtick I was doing. That's where Danny Scott was emceeing. But I've met Danny in Tunbridge. And then lying in bed on Sunday morning, I was like, what can I do? So I wrote a whole new 5 minutes, which involved someone reading out bits from a big bit of card that I was holding. A bit Love Actually. But and then each night, actually, no, I had three in a row where I couldn't speak. I mean, after a couple of days, I could still there was sound coming out of my mouth, but I couldn't do the 5 minutes that I would normally do. So the first night, another comedian that I didn't know, that I'd met through a WhatsApp group, she volunteered to come and be my narrator. And then the next day, I got this guy in the pub who wasn't even there for the comedy to do it. And he was so deadpan. He was more deadpan than me. It was kind of perfect. And then they all had to hold glasses of wine as well. And then the next night was a comedian. It was at the Queer Comedy Club, and it was another comedian, a male comedian that volunteered. So I had all this range of people doing the same 5 minutes, and it was really interesting. But that was like necessity. That was totally like the necessity being the mother of invention. It's like, how do I get around these not pulling out of these comedy nights, because I didn't want to pull out of them. And you also, what it's like. It's like I'm kind of adamant that I'm not going to withdraw out of a comedy night, especially not on the day. I try and make sure I kind of fulfill my commitments.
Yeah.
Especially in that scene, it's like it's shitty to kind of pull out last minute if you don't have to. I mean, I probably
could. Yeah,
had
you
a good
do.
enough reason.
That's what I was going to say. It's probably the fact that you can't speak.
I got to Sunday shtick and I was like, Dora Flowers, who read it for me, she was saying to Danny, so I'm going to be Lucy's narrator, she can't speak. And he was like, See, there really isn't any reason to pull out of a gig. But it was good. So, yeah, I think sometimes inspiration, and it's like being in the state of flow with drawing and this, that, and the other. I mean, it's a bit of both, isn't it? Because I think with an artistic practice too, people that make work, a lot of people will have a work ethic and they'll go to the studio every day and they'll make work. And it's like what you were saying about not blocking the pipelines, like the Seinfeld quote of like writing stuff down and anything could lead to somewhere. I think that's the thing. I think that's what I want to get more in my life and let it be less. I want a bit more of that because at the moment it's a random approach as and when stuff comes to me. And I think I would like to build it into my routine in a way because I feel like it's getting the least of my attention is the writing of stuff in my life at the moment.
Which it's it kind of I mean it makes sense because I think when I was doing because we didn't even but you had a very good year, like you've got some like awards or like nominations under your belt which were really cool. So it's been a very like fruitful year, but I think I've been in one way or another. I understand very much your feeling because I know that at some point I probably did no writing whatsoever while now again I do the writing, but I also have this thing where because I don't have days off. However, I do have time off because like I still take like 15 minutes of a day to do something, and like look, for example, to me, like everything that's happening from tomorrow onwards, I feel like besides of this, and I have another recording this week, but then besides of that, I feel like I'm on holiday. I have the time off. Just that in the evening I'm gonna do a gig, but then I think the understanding or like what worked basically, or like what is working for me is that I don't necessarily like I have, even on a day off I would still do something, but then I don't see that day as like, oh my god, I've not done, or like, oh, I've worked today, because I think every time when I try not to do anything, I'm just like I'm gonna relax today, I end up worrying about the things I should do tomorrow. While now, if I'm like, oh, I'm either gonna do it or I'm going to write it, I'm gonna put it on my little to-do list. So and it kind of worked.
Lists are good. I'm a list writer. I don't know. I think forcing it to say I'm going to write stuff. I mean, there's a book called The Artist's Way that a lot of artists, and I now probably should remember who wrote The Artist's Way, but it's little exercises to do every day, and they're kind of starter points for kind of the creative process. And then I know writer friends that have had like the only time they can write is in this 1 hour that's in a weird time on a Friday morning, and they get more work done in that time than they would otherwise. I guess I'm in the position where I don't really have, I don't have children, I don't have responsibilities like that. Mostly I build structure my life how it suits me.
Yeah.
So I do have more kind of time and like space, kind of breathing space to do that and to write stuff. I mean, I feel like, talking about how many gigs I've been doing, I'm trying to do less in a way, like we were saying, how writing new stuff also requires some life stuff to be happening. To get out there and do things outside of comedy world, I think is quite beneficial for me. And I think that's what I'm doing. This is a period that I'm going through because, like we were saying earlier, and you were talking about how it's not linear. It's like you can have these kind of excessive periods of like doing loads of gigs, and then you need a breathing space to write some more material. And I think I'm in the period of needing a breathing space at the moment. But then I never give it to myself. But I'm working on doing a half-hour show in July.
What?
In Tunbridge Wells, which is the Tunbridge Wells Fringe Festival. And I've booked, So like I said with dates, like I need an endpoint. So I've got some dates. So I need to do a half-hour show by July, basically. So that's why I think I'm going to do less comedy, even though it sounds counterproductive. or maybe it doesn't. I think that's why I'm going to do less. I'm going to do less and just go through everything I've got and really kind of take some time to do some writing.
I used to be very opinionated, but yeah, if I've learned anything more is that everyone does things differently, because some people just want to like go out all the time and work. Some people would rather like, you know, write and rest up, because I think I've seen someone, I can't remember who it was, but I remember someone last year, I think, saying that, oh, I don't understand all these comedians who are like taking the month of July off so that they can basically rest up before they go to Edinburgh. If anything, you know, in August, anything you should, you know, work hard on. I think again, everyone learns from their own, you know, experiences. So some people maybe, you know, they took the time off and they went to Edinburgh and they were like, oh, I should have not taken the time off. Some people might have been, oh, maybe taking the time off was the best thing I've done. I think it's just accepting that, you know, everything works differently. And I think when you're I think, to be honest, I think it sounds incredible, the fact that you're doing the 30 minutes. It's like such a it's tough, you know. I think I sometimes when I speak with like comedians, I just feel like it's incredibly hard. I think when I used to watch comedy as a fan, I would think, oh my God, these people are coming with like 1 hour long shows that look so easy. And then I sometimes go on stage and I look at the time and that's only 7 minutes.
Yeah. I know. We'll see. I haven't done it yet.
So you see, yeah, you it's such a challenge, and I think you deserve like a lot of credit for it, you know, to work to it. Because I generally, I think the last time I did a couple of 20s, and to me I was like, oh God, that was hard. So again, you know, well done.
I mean, I don't know, do you, because I pretty much know what I'm going to say. I don't really deviate that much if I've got a set. I don't know how much you deviate from what your original...
Ooh. I think the way I write, I know what I'm going to talk about. I just don't know. I know the start and the end of my stories, but I sometimes don't say everything that's in the middle, if that makes sense. I always think about it in a basically like Nate. I listened to Nate Bargatze, who was saying that basically he had this style of like writing about, I think he was saying something about 10 to 15 hooks within a story, and whether he's going to say 7 out of those hooks, whether he's going to use all the 15, it depends on like what he remembers and like what triggers him in the moment. So it's still funny, it's still a story, it's still going for, I know where I'm starting, I know where I'm ending, but how much? Because I feel like you know, when I do the bit about like my parents, for example, like sometimes I forget to say some things, which now I'm learning about, like what was the most important thing that people need to know. You know, for example, the fact that they split up. I think that, or like the reason, you know, so then I get what's most important, and I still have some other bits which I may say, I may not, depending on like, you know, whether, because I think sometimes like now I'm in a position where, you know, if I do like a 7 minute, then I might have to like cut it short because I know I'm running out of time. So, and then sometimes because I'm doing like a 10 minutes or like 15 minutes, I feel like, oh God, now I need to brush off, you know, all the hooks. Yeah, it's very interesting, but I don't know, I just always feel like in my head it's all it as it goes, you know. And I think sometimes now what I found in the past weeks is that, not the weeks but like actually months, is that I managed to gauge the audience a little bit better, because I see like, oh, if I do something, I'm like, oh, this doesn't really feel like it's working. Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up and I'm going to move on to a different story. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely starting to be more like that too. It's quite good now. I used to get so nervous before and I knew exactly what I was going to be saying and doing. And now more and more I'll turn up and I'll see what other people are doing as well first and see what's going down well. And then I can adapt my 5 that I'm doing. But a lot of my early stuff, I've also got myself into a bit of a thing with props, and a lot of my first 5 minutes, I needed two props, which I don't always carry around with me. So there's certain bits that I can't kind of suddenly go into unless I start walking around with a big comedy prop rucksack,
Well,
which I might end up doing.
That's what I was going to say. No, that's okay. Bless you. You say that, but I was chatting with Stephen Catling in this in like one of the very early episodes, and he usually has to travel with a suitcase, and I think it's funny because and then sometimes because I like sometimes he talks about how he forgets some part of equipment and he's I can't do that. And I just thought it's incredible, like it's hilarious because I usually carry like the amount of times I forget my tripod at home that I'm trying to like use for recording, it's ridiculous. So to think that I think I used to do a bit about the royal family where I carried a tie around where I was pretending to be King Charles, but still when he was a prince. And I lost the tie after like 2 gigs or something like that, and I was like,
huh? Oh, you lost it on purpose?
No, I just lost it. I just left it at a gig. I don't know where, I don't know how. It's just gone. And then I was like, and I remember I paid like £3.50 or something. And I was like, I'm not spending any more money on this because knowing myself, I'm just gonna lose it. So again, kudos to you, for like doing props. And I think I've seen loads of comedians that are doing it. I think it's the new. It's the way like alternative people see alternative comedy now, besides of just like musical comedy, props comedy. It's becoming. I think it's getting bigger, and it kind of makes sense because I think I've seen like Jude Apatow with he had like a slideshow at his show, so it doesn't surprise me.
At the beginning, there's the glass of red wine that I always have on stage, which was it's become an affectation. But that was the reason I started. That was because the first five I did, I was really nervous and I was holding my glass of wine and I was like, I'm going to keep this on stage. And then my friend was like, you should keep your glass of wine. So I've worked, like the amount that I've spent on glasses of red wine in the 87 gigs that I've done so far, and in London prices. God. We're looking at over £500 anyway, but
Jesus.
Probably when you add it up. But at the beginning, the first 5 minutes, I had 3 props. I had, I won't go into a couple of them, but one of them was a life-size cutout of Charlie Chaplin, which I was carrying around. But he folded into 3. He folded.
Okay, that's fine. He's folding nicely.
He did fold, but he was still quite cumbersome.
God.
So then I ditched him. I could still do that 5 minutes because I just brought the life-size Charlie Chaplin on at the very last bit of the 5 minutes, and I could still do the 5 minutes, and it worked okay. He was just a cherry on top of the cake for it, in my opinion. Like other people probably would think you don't even need to bring Charlie Chaplin around, but so I ditched Charlie, and he's in the cupboard at home. But I do feel like I need to bring him back out because, I probably will for the half-hour show that I'm doing in Tunbridge Wells. But yeah,
it's okay. I was going to say
I'm carrying a tripod around a lot, but it's like a little mini one that I fold down, and actually it's in 3 little parts. And
no, mine. It's very it can like fit in a backpack. I just forget it anyway. Like, I think for about a week, it's like right behind where you're sitting. It was just there, and I see it, and I would still forget it. Or my favorite thing is that now, because of my whole I have like a nose issue, like a breathing issue. So I have to use a mask on public transport. And the amount of times I would take the mask and just leave it on the table and just walk past it. And then I get to the tube station. So now I carry the whole bag with masks in my backpack. And still, sometimes once in a while, you'll just see one mask on the table. I pulled out on purposefully, and I still forget it.
We've got a little London kit. It's the going to work first and then comedy, a hefty backpack that we're all carrying around, and the chat amongst other stand-up comedians about tripods and what tripod to get and what's the lightest and what can fit in. I've got this really odd construction that I've bought from 3 separate bits that are fitted together, which barely does the job, but it does do the job. And I record I mean, I don't think I've recorded 87, but I've pretty much recorded every set that I've done.
That's impressive.
But I haven't watched them. I can only watch them in small bits. I find it too excruciating, like seeing myself and hearing myself. It's like I've started to be able to listen to little bits at a time, but watching the whole thing. And I think it's just I've got to immerse myself and like just get over it, because I guess it's useful. But I was saying to someone the other day, it was like, I don't know if I actively kind of sit down and analyse what I've done and what bits have gone well and why at that particular occasion. But I think you're actively doing that anyway. I think you're formatively doing that even when you're on stage. So I feel like even if I haven't sat down and watched the 5 minutes, I mean, I record it now just so that I've got it, and if I ever do want to, and I obviously use them for putting them on my YouTube and stuff. I mean, I can do that. I can put them on my YouTube channel. I just can't watch them. But I do think I'm analysing during and then after, and you're thinking about it a little bit. But sometimes you do obviously you do the same 5 minutes in different rooms, in a different lineup, and the variables are so variable. There's so many variables that it's quite difficult to put your finger on what's happened.
The only reason why, and I do listen to I usually at the moment, I feel like when I go to a gig that's like new material, I don't bother filming it. I would just basically, like, depending on the audience sizes. If it's a big audience, then I will record it. Otherwise, I will just I will film it. Otherwise, I will just like voice record it. And the reason why I listen back to it, because I agree with you. I hate looking. I hate looking at myself, especially like on video, and I find my voice annoying, which is quite funny. But I listen to the reason what makes me want to listen to it is that, for example, on Thursday I did a gig, and as I was saying something, I was like improvising, because I was working on this bit, and I said something that I didn't write down, and I didn't think until I went on stage, and it actually worked really well, which now, funny enough, I can't remember what it is, but I remember as soon as I got off stage, I was like, oh, I need to listen to this, because again, it was like one line that I did not have on my set, and it actually worked really well, and I need to listen why it worked. And I think it was about, because I was saying to you earlier, like, because when I got the bit about, like, oh, that's where I'm from, I live here now. I think it was something to do where I've learned, like, how I've learned English, and it goes on my bit about like not speaking English and everything. And I was like, that's what that was the
missing
puzzle.
bit.
That was the missing bit, and this is why I went back to like listening to that. Like, this is the reason why I go back to listening to the voice memo, more because of that, more because I also, what I'm trying to do is, especially because I do comedy in English, I'm trying to make sure that people understand what I'm saying. So I would listen back to it, and I'm like, did they not laugh because it wasn't funny?
Yeah.
Or did they not laugh because they didn't understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, you've got that extra element, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it works to my advantage, I think, because I can say stuff, and some things sometimes I can say things like random words, and people will laugh because it's so random. So I do like to use it for my favor. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh God, I wish you'd see what I see when I'm saying this.
Do people? I mean, I guess you don't always know people that are the nights. Will people come and say to you, I didn't do people correct you?
You know what actually happened, and it was like one of the nicest people that I've met on the circuit, quite at the beginning of me doing stand up. His name is Haris Takini. He's based in Manchester, and I met, and he told me after a show, because I used to have this bit. I don't think I've ever done it when we crossed paths, but it was a bit about the movie Nomadland.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, you're saying, because I used to say it, I think I used to say it Nomadland, and he was like, he saw me a couple of times, and he said, look, because I've seen you a couple of times, I know that you're talking about Nomadland, but when I watch you the first time, it takes me a while to understand what you're talking about. just because I don't understand why you like the name of the movie. And I was like, oh, interesting. So then I started going like Nomadland, or like I have
articulating it.
yeah. So stuff like that. So yeah, it happened in the past, I think. And it's always, I do appreciate it. I really like it when again, I don't know how you feel about like taking feedback, but sometimes I'm like, I always listen anyway. I wouldn't follow it sometimes just because I'm like, I usually get people go, oh, you should go in that direction. I'm like, well, maybe that's why you would go in that direction, because that's the sort of comedy that you do. While what I'm trying to do is not that. So but I appreciate the advice, because I think again, it's interesting to see and also like sometimes when I do bits and I feel like I have a whole story or whatever, and then they're like, no, the punchline is actually here rather than then. I'm like, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not great at taking feedback, especially unsolicited. I mean, I guess I would, if someone comes up and starts trying to sell me something, I'll immediately get really defensive and shut down and be like, not like actively, like they may not see it, but I'll be like, yeah, okay. But it's like that, isn't it? It's like, I guess I could benefit from being more open to feedback. At the same time, we're trying to develop our own voices and ways of doing things, aren't we? And however we get to that point. So I'm not sure. I mean, I was trying to find it the other day. My mum's got this school report of mine when I was about 5, where my teacher says that I need to learn how to take correction more graciously. And I don't think I've ever changed. I'm like, no, I can't. That's why I don't do any writing. Like, I don't do any of the writing groups or comedy courses or anything, because I feel like I would just get really defensive.
I mean, I haven't done it because one, I couldn't afford it at the time. I can't really afford it now, and I appreciate it. I think it's such an impressive way, and I think sometimes, like for example, because you did mention Sang earlier, Sang knows so much about comedy, and he's a very comedy literate guy. And I remember sometimes chatting with him, and he would say something, and I'm like, I've never heard this word before in my life, and I'd feel a little bit ashamed about it. But then ultimately, I feel like, if it works, it works. Like if I think, because again, comedy it's subjective. Some people treat it as it's like a recipe. Some people just, I've seen. Look, for example, you get so many comedians that are just going and like just riffing on stage. Again, some works, some works, some doesn't. But also, I've seen loads of comedians with like prepared lists of jokes, or like even like, look, you see people like one-liners, for example, like people who write like on clipboard to go on stage and they do it, and then they're like, it doesn't work. So it's not as if there is a key for it. So I think whatever works, and that's. But also, I thought it was funny about your report card, because you can be like, there were signs. I was thinking about like this, where you. No, I'm really sorry, but it's like, when you watch like a serial killer documentary, and they're like, there were signs, and you're like, look, there were signs. I don't listen to like feedback.
No. But I mean, if you think about this, especially if we're thinking about this in terms of like mental health, I suppose it's like we're doing something where it's not like if you're having an exhibition and people will come in and they'll come up to you and start to heckle you about a piece of art. Not that I've done many nights where you get heckled, but I have done a few kind of gong shows, and I made a decision for my mental health, I suppose, and for the way that I deliver, to not, because I used to get so stressed about doing gong shows and it would kind of really mess with my pace. And so I made a decision that I wasn't going to do them. So I don't currently do any gong shows or anything. But also we're doing something that's got immediate feedback, haven't we? So there's a lot of it is like, because this kind of idea of external validation, I think there's a kind of, I don't know if it's a thread that runs through comedians, because I think there's such a diverse community of people doing stand-up. But I feel like this kind of external validation, and then the opposite, of course, is the kind of critical feedback, is such a kind of difficult, for some people, and for me, I find it a very difficult thing to kind of get my head around. Because obviously you want a really good show and you want this kind of gratification of this like positive feedback. And then if you're basing the success of a gig on that, then when it goes badly, then you're really torn down by it as well. I mean, I listened to, do you know Blind Boy? I listened to Blind Boy
No.
podcast. He was part of a comedy duo called the Rubber Bandits. They were a musical comedy duo.
Okay.
And he now has a huge podcast where, you know, I don't know how many millions of people, but he was an art kind of, he's philosophizes about art and the modern kind of condition of what we're dealing with every day. But he talks about this idea of external validation and how he has endeavored to get to a point where he is very much focused on what he is making and his voice rather than the validation from the outside. But then I guess at the same time, if you get to that point, which seems like quite a healthy way to do this, you're not getting the buzz. You're not getting a buzz of people telling you you're good, which is quite a buzz, isn't it? You probably won't get the lows as well. So I don't know, this kind of consistent approach of kind of feeling like, I mean, I also, there was something I saw on Instagram the other day, Rick Rubin, the music producer, where he talks about writing.
That's exactly what I was going to, yeah.
I just like this, it really reminds me that, because when you write something that you think's good, it's so much more important, isn't it, that you believe in your material than
yes,
other people
yes,
believing in your material. But it's a fine line because you still have to perform.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm in this weird kind of position now where I'm finding my feet in a way of stuff not crushing you. Because like you said, when you started and about 2 weeks in, you did another 5 and it didn't go as well as the first and you thought about stopping doing it. It's like every day you do a gig, it's like can be these ups and downs, can't there?
Yeah.
I mean, the more that you do, I find the more that I've done, the more that evens out. Because there's an element, I've got an element of perfectionism about, you know, the way that I work and stuff. I don't mean to do with comedy, I mean in my life. So it was always like, no, this has to be really good tonight.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't go really well and I don't get all the kind of like laughs that I want, then it's been like shit and a disaster. And I think I'm evening out a little bit now. So
you see, this is where I think like the Rick Rubin stuff helped me out quite a bit. Where I know which of my bits are good and are a part of my show. So now it's about building the confidence on the new material. Mm-hmm. That's what I know that like my first 2 jokes I'm very happy with and I trust them. I know that I have confidence in them. So I think now it's about building confidence, because also this is the reason why I was we were chatting about it before we started recording about how, you know, like being selective with gigs, like what am I getting out of this night? Because sometimes like I wouldn't go with my good stuff to a night where there are like very little people or like the energy is not like great, I guess, because then I found it from the past where I tried my good material at those nights, it didn't go well, so then I would lose trust in that good material, and to get it back it's just so hard, at least for me. So I'm actually the same with gong shows. You know, I found that I can do, again, I still get nervous before gigs, like right until I go on stage, but it's only like at gong shows where I'm nervous while I'm on stage. And me and another comedian friend of mine had a conversation about it, and their point was that you know, I feel like we already, like they were saying that, you know, the comedy is like such a beautiful art form, and we're already kind of like, you know, being like sensible in front of other people, that it should be enough, rather than, you know, this whole, oh, here's a card,
another element of anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why, and I was like, oh, you know what, that makes so much sense, and that's so true. And I wouldn't say I'm not doing it. I do, but I don't do them as regularly, or like, I don't think it it defines comedians, because again, it's an art form. Like, you know, you can be the most awarded, you know, or like you can win a gong show and it means nothing.
Yeah.
But then you can't like never win one, and you can still, you know, get to where you want to be as a comedian. It's very different because it's so much about like who's holding the cards, what's the atmosphere on the night. I remember when I got through the semifinals at the Frog and Bucket, the in the first half, and I was like I think I was the last or the second to last in the first half. Nobody got through, and everyone were the audience was just barely like laughing, and it wasn't just at my. And I know I didn't do well. Like I know some of the stuff that I did there wasn't good, but it was just like so, like the whole night just felt like really sad and borderline depressing. You know, I remember at the halftime just like going to a bar around the corner because I was like, I don't want to stay here because I just felt sad.
Well, I signed up to do that one actually because I was doing.
Oh, it's a good night.
Yeah, I was doing Up the Creek, and then I had the first time I did Up the Creek, I didn't beat the gong, but I didn't beat the blackout, but I had a really good like 3.5 minutes. It felt good. It felt positive. And then the second 2 times I did it, it just felt horrible. And I would think I was trying to get that the first time back because obviously it's a big room. It's quite a good space to, you know. At least there you get 2 minutes anyway. I was trying to see it as like I've got a 2-minute set here, and then whatever. But it didn't quite work out like that because you do feel a bit like. And so then I was thinking I need to do gong shows. Someone said they beat the frog. Beat the frog, yeah.
Beat the frog, yeah.
I signed up for it, and then I was like, "What are you doing? You're getting the train to Manchester, and then staying in a hotel, and you might last like 20 seconds." So I decided not to do it, basically. I made a decision to not go. And not to say that I wouldn't re-sign up and go and do it again. But I was just like, at that period, I was like feeling like I had to do everything that everyone was doing.
Yeah.
And then I've spoken to a few people, like you say, like half the people I speak to, like, no, you don't have to do gong shows. And because it's a new thing really for me. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing with it. So I was just seeing what people were doing, and people do gong shows. So I was like, I better do some gong shows. And actually, when I first started, like the first time I did Hold the Line, and then the next gig I did after that, the first like London gig was at the Cavendish, which is like one of my favourite places to go, the Comedy Virgins. At the time then I was like, well, I'm never going to do any of these gong shows. Absolutely not. And then you get to a point where you're like, yeah, maybe I'll give one of them a go, which is quite a nice point to get to. And then to make the decision to not do them for the time being was quite good because I felt like I was getting wrapped up in having to do stuff. And it's exactly what I was saying. It's like, well, no, you don't have to do anything because no one's actually forcing, like, Up the Creek are not coming around your house saying you've got to do 5 minutes or not even. You've got to 2 minutes, two miserable minutes, and then some like extra ones. But yeah, so I don't feel like I'm a gong show. But then I could say, oh no, my stuff wouldn't work in a gong show, which isn't true because I see a lot of people that don't do that kind of energy because a lot of the people that do gong shows seem to be quite high energy and kind of really kind of buzzing off the whole experience. And it's not true because I see people that have a different delivery style and that are alternative that do very well at gong shows as well. So I'm not saying that at all. But for me at the time where I was feeling really terrible after gong shows and beforehand, I was like, I just gave myself a break and said, you don't have to do that.
Fair.
Because it's me that's signing up to stuff and no one's making me. So I think it's that, isn't it? It's like finding your own confidence and voice in it. Because I was thinking, right, well, there's a route. And I don't even know what my goal is with comedy. But you follow other people. I don't really have a particular...
Yeah.
Like I have this small incremental goals, like I want to do longer sets with bigger rooms. That's my current one. And then I guess I've got the half-hour thing in the half-hour show that I'm working towards. But ultimately, I never really thought about doing comedy, so I didn't really have any goals. So I was looking around, seeing what other people were doing. And there's the gong show thing happening. So that's how I started doing that. There is a bit of FOMO. It's like, what's that night? I've not heard of that. I want to do that. And then you get a bit like, you can't be like that. Because like we were saying earlier, every given night in London, there's about 3 or 4, if not many more nights that you could do. So you'd be exhausted if you're trying to do them all the time.
I think that's a big thing, like the not getting into like that fear of missing out That's for sure. And also, I was going to say that whenever you reconsider doing again, Frog and Bucket is my probably like, I think out after Hot Water in Liverpool is like my favorite comedy club in UK. So it's a beautiful club. It's a great night. They're also like, I think they did like Women in Comedy, you know, all throughout. I think it might be either February or March. But anyway, like, again, basically the work that they do and the way I think like they are very proactive on basically like creating like a safe and like a very inclusive environment. That's why I do definitely like check it out and do like try it at some point. And I will probably again haven't been in Manchester in like almost a year because it's been like so much happening. But yeah,
I mean, I had a couple of friends in Manchester that I'd invited to come along, and then I was like, I think I would have been so disappointed if I'd gone up there and I had friends there and I lasted like 30 seconds. But then maybe, you know, you just make a night of it, don't you?
I think it's strange because like I know the time when I went, I had some friends coming over, and that was a part of me was like, oh my god, those people are. And I think the night before this, the night before Frog and Bucket, I got blackout drunk, and I ended up falling asleep on the street. And someone had to basically like this like I think anyway those like two people saw me like sleeping on the ground, and had to call my flatmate, and then I basically I woke up on one of my mates' couch because it turns out I fell asleep outside his building.
Right, well that's handy.
And and because my flatmate at the time couldn't get a taxi, or at least so he said, he called our mutual friend, one of my best mates, and he was like, oh, you know, he seems like he's underneath your building, can you go downstairs? And I pick him up because we were on like Find My, we were all we'd like see each other's location. And no, my mate was like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna go down. And then they came down, him, his flatmate, her boyfriend, and they lifted me up, took me in a flat. Apparently I threw up. I don't remember again. Like, that's all like what I've heard from people. And then I just woke up on Monday morning on his sofa, and I just remember waking up, and he was just like sitting next to me, kind of like, you know, like we are now. And he was just like, kind of like watching me, you know. And I just wake up and I was like, you know, like what the, you know, like I felt like, what is happening? How am I here? And then he was like, good morning. And I was like, oh God. And I was still hungover, and I walked home. And then, and that same evening I had some friends, you know, coming to see me. And again, that was like after three months in comedy. And I almost canceled. I think if there were people, you had
to get the train up.
Sorry? No, because I was living in Manchester.
I was living,
right. At the time I was living in Manchester. Okay. And I would have cancelled if it wasn't for my friends to come, because I felt so miserable. And I went on stage and I got through, and I managed to win the night. But I remember getting off stage, and funnily enough, when my mate went home, he went on the corner where he like picked me up from, took a picture, and he was like, oh, you left the bed like undone, mate. I was like, oh God. And
but it's that probably took the edge off, right? Because you were thinking about your hangover.
Oh God,
feeling miserable.
Maybe.
So being on stage was like the least of your worries.
I think actually, I think so, because I remember going on, and he was, because he's like, I don't know if you've seen it, might have on like videos and stuff from there. You know, you kind of like, you walk up some stairs, and the stage is quite tiny, and also it was a Christmas tree on stage as well, and it was even, and I was like, what if I fall? Like I was thinking, what if I fall over the Christmas tree? What if I like, you know, just it was all just. It felt so difficult. I actually think, funnily enough, whether I was going to go through or not, didn't, you know, because I think at one point I was like, you know what, I go on, maybe I get like gonged off and I can just go home and sleep.
Go back to bed.
Yeah.
I think that's really good to have something that takes the edge off what you're about to do.
Well, no, in the meantime, I'm sober now, and I've stopped drinking. But again, it helped out on that night. Anyway, well, you know, it's been so incredible. We didn't even speak about everything we wanted to, but I still feel like we had a great conversation. Now, you were saying earlier that you are in a Getty in one of the Getty library books?
It's called the Getty Museum Challenge, I think, and it's a little book of all kind of a collection of people's art recreations.
Now, if people want to, check out like your work, comedy, or anything that you do, where do they find you?
Yeah, I'm mostly active on Instagram, and my handle is Pook Pook, which is my surname. Pook paying attention.
Perfect. Well, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you, and thank you for coming for this, and thank you for everyone listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
How was it? Was it what you wished for? I hope so. Well, make sure you check out Lucy's socials because I think the Tunbridge Festival, the Tunbridge Comedy Festival that she was talking about, it's happening very soon. So check that out if you want to see her there. I'm also going to book up the rest of the maybe not the year, but at least the rest of the summer and towards fall. Um, Mainly, obviously, gigs in London. But yeah, check out my socials for that because I'll put up the dates there. Sometimes it's on a weekly basis, sometimes monthly. It really depends on how quickly I figure out where I am being booked. That's it from me this week, though, and from me, Pickle and Sarma, who are just running around, and me, who's talking in this mic. We wish you a happy week and stay skillful, folks. Look after yourselves. All the best. Bye bye.